2024. Could we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Altman. Here. Councilmember Meadows.
Here.
Councilmember Watson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Singh.
Here.
Mayor Brickover.
Here. Could we have a motion relative to the agenda, please?
Yes. I would like to move approval of the agenda minus item 3.1.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the agenda is approved as modified. Item 1.3, we have before us the minutes of March 19th, 2024.
So moved.
Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I said moved.
Meadows moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Watson. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, communications 2.1, all written communications received by council are posted on the online agenda packet. Item 2.2 is communications from the audience. I've analyzed the audience tonight in my infinite wisdom, and I suspect that there are a lot of people that here are to talk on the overlay district. So I'd just like to point out, you can talk about the overlay district either during public comment right now, or you can save your comments until the public hearing. They count either way. So I have a number of blue sheets from the audience. Michael Alexanian.
Thank you, George. Council members. I'm here in support of the Glen Kieran overlay proposal. As a resident whose family has lived here for a total of 71 years in the same address on Stewart Avenue, I have become accustomed to a certain type of lifestyle in the neighborhood, which is families putting down roots, raising children, going through the East Lansing school system, same way I did back in the late 50s. And I would really be sad to see that change and have it compromised by the inclusion of such properties as multi-person rentals and Airbnbs. Once again, as I said at a previous meeting, if this is the change we are going in direction-wise, I will be the first enemy of that change. So as one, as I say, who's been here over 70 years, please take that into consideration when you're making your decision about the overlay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Shadar? Yeah.
Good evening. I had not turned in my sheet earlier, so thank you for calling me, though. Today marks the 4th consecutive month of my attending the council meeting and asking the council to call for a ceasefire resolution in Gaza. While my ask may be redundant, the death and suffering in Gaza are much more, and they cannot just be dismissed so easily. There has never been a war in history where 80% of the country has been decimated. 100% of the population is displaced. 100% of the country is facing famine. And that is according to our own Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. 50% of the deaths are children, 30% of whom are, 30% of the deaths are women. Lawmakers are now calling for halting military aid to Israel. Yesterday, Senator Elizabeth Warren called it what it is, a genocide. Earlier in the week, President Biden called the situation unacceptable. Dozens of major cities across Michigan have called for a ceasefire. What is stopping you, the council? Majority of the citizens here are calling for a ceasefire. Netanyahu has arrogantly claimed yesterday that he will invade Rafah. This is despite President Biden calling Rafah a red line. This is why we need everyone at all levels to call for a ceasefire so that President Biden can call for a ceasefire more forcefully. Once again, I implore you to please consider the resolution which the Human Rights Commission passed, as well as majority of the citizens who've been coming here repeatedly and requesting you of the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your thoughts and your efforts. Tayson, if you can just pass it over there so we can keep track. Thank you. Fred Fritz.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that a couple months ago that you listened and that there was the ability for people outside the current R01 proposal to at least be informed of the proposal that was moving ahead. And I still ask that for those people who are in the areas adjacent to the proposed R01 have the opportunity to somehow petition to be added to this at some point, or that there be some kind of process put in place. I do appreciate that I could be here tonight. Thank you.
And just to confirm, your address is 238 Clarendon?
Right.
Thank you. Dr. Dixon?
I'll wait till the R01.
Oh, okay, to the public hearing? Okay. Dr. Dixon?
I will wait until
Mr. French?
I'll wait till the public hearing. Thank you.
Jim Newton?
I'm going to wait till the hearing also.
Ms. Bonning?
I'll go with the majority, public hearing.
Mr. Lipinski?
Same.
Ms. Newton?
Same.
Mr. Baker?
I'm going to break bread.
Thank you. I was thinking that might happen.
I'll be brief. I've said pretty much what I have to say tonight on a couple of previous occasions. I believe that the stability of neighborhoods is promoted by strictly regulating rental of property. The Bailey School is no longer the Bailey School because that neighborhood became a rental neighborhood, or much of it did, at least in my perception. And I think it's important that East Lansing have stable residential neighborhoods. These ordinances are difficult enough to enforce without creating exceptions, which I understand the desire for. But it seems to me that you move to a use, you move to a neighborhood, you accept it as you found it, and this is not a rental neighborhood. I delight in watching children walk to school in the morning when I'm up that early, as Molly does with her daughter. And I think this overlay is a wise extension. I think people who live in the proposed extension of the overlay were surprised to find that they weren't there. And I hope you will approve the overlay proposal. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Ms. French? Tammy? I don't think our timer's working. Okay.
So this is in regards to the overlay.
All right, thank you. Yeah.
My name is Melissa French, and I live at 321 Clarendon. My home lies within the proposed R01 overlay district boundary, and I am opposed to the overlay. Over the past few meetings, speakers have mentioned that Glen is a beautiful and walkable neighborhood with unique home and friendly neighbors. Since moving here last spring, we agree with all of these statements. This is a wonderful area to have a home. When I say I'm opposed to the overlay, though, it does not mean that I am pro-rental. My husband and I have no desires to rent our home now or in the future. Our opposition lies in what we interpret to be a proposed policy based on fear. The fear that the neighborhood is going to become something other than what it is. When I say I'm opposed to the overlay, it does not mean, sorry. So today I wanted to focus on a few things that I believe most everyone in the room would agree on. We don't want what many of us would call a traditional student rental, and we don't want short-term rentals like Airbnbs or VRBOs. Over the past few months, I've read the city ordinances and policies related to the rentals. In regards to the fear of student rentals, I feel this concern has already been curtailed through the zoning and ordinances of the city already has in place. Glen Karen has current zoning of either an R1 or an R2, depending on where you are. And without the overlay, both R1 and R2 have identical restrictions regarding the type of rental license that can be obtained. With the existing restrictions in place, what we deem a student rental is not a threat to this neighborhood. We've already solved this issue through limiting the types of licensing that's available. In regards to the short-term rentals, such as Airbnbs, the City of East Lansing needs to create a code ordinance specific to this concern. Other municipalities, including many of our neighboring cities, have ordinances already in place that address short-term rentals. Why East Lansing has not already done this, I'm not sure. However, it seems like something that should be addressed. I'm hopeful that you will consider drafting an ordinance related to short-term rentals such as Airbnbs. I believe that you will find most of the community would support this. But once you sweep away the concerns regarding the student rentals and the short-term rentals, all that's left for rental options in Glen Karen is either a Class 1 or a Class 3. So the reasons that I oppose the overlay for this neighborhood is twofold. First, a neighbor at a previous meeting suggested there were many illegal rentals in the neighborhood currently. Now, I don't know this for a fact, just moved here, but I would believe that that's true. In fact, the home we recently purchased has been modified to suggest it was previously used as a rental, although there is no rental license on record for the home. By adding an overlay, you are denying the people that currently rent illegally to ever make that arrangement permitted. For whatever reason those households have a renter, I assume it's not a nuisance to the neighbors, or it would have been reported. By opposing the overlay, we allow these community members to continue their arrangements legally by obtaining a valid rental license. This also allows a path for homeowners with a renter to process eviction proceedings if necessary. Evicting someone who is not a licensed tenant is typically more difficult and expensive. The second reason I oppose this overlay is because, as I mentioned earlier, I have no current desire to rent my home. However, I would like the option if the circumstances ever dictated that I found it necessary. My husband and I work together as small business owners, but he is the primary breadwinner. If something were to happen to him that disallowed him to work, I would be forced to move, go through foreclosure proceedings. Neither option would be ideal for the value in my home or for the value of my neighbors' homes. One other thing I wanted to mention, it's not in my notes, but looking over the petition of who signed to approve this overlay, I think you will find that the longer people have been in this neighborhood, the more they approve of the overlay. And I think as we move forward, as homes are sold and purchased, the younger demographic that will be moving in seems to really support not having the overlay in place. And this was all found based on the petition and the sale dates of the homes in the neighborhood.
3 seconds remaining.
So the final request I would like to make to the panel today is in regard to your decision-making process on this matter. At a previous meeting, one panel member provided a reason behind her vote. I would encourage each of you to do the same. Whatever your vote may be, I hope it is thoughtful and informed. I hope you can share with us how the policies of the city either align with this proposal or why you believe they do not. Please do not simply use the fear of something or the process was completed properly to pass a proposal that impacts the residents of this community.
Thank you for coming. Is there anybody in the queue?
We have one caller in the queue. Caller with a number ending in 954, you're welcome to address council.
Hello, did that work?
Yes.
We can hear you.
I'm gonna say this slow and steady because it's a bit of a echo. So this is Nicole Kiway Biber. I am calling from Blanchett Street. I'm on the Parks and Recreation Commission and wanted to talk a bit about No Mow May. So our letter we sent, we trying to be grounded in reality about that there's shifting seasons and, there's invasives like dandelions. So just sort of putting it out there, to think of this maybe in another alliterative as a sort of pollinator pause, that it's mostly to, pay attention to the plight of the fact that they need food that comes in the spring. It might not just be all of May, it might be a lot of ephemeral spring flowers now are coming out in April. So, it's sort of a matter of actively resolving to kind of learn about, on the website that East Lansing has as a pollinator-friendly community, sort of the things that you can do that maybe you can change, and the no mow May, the matter of where the food that they need early on, even with dandelions, they are useful, but it might not necessarily mean you have to let them all go to the white heads. If you see like, hey, they were open and yellow and, all the violets are out, this is really good. That's the kind of food they need. And then, maybe you need to do a pass over those dandelions so they don't, just spread as an invasive. So just to mention that, it's a lot of it is just an invitation, I think, to just pay greater attention to those, small voiceless members of our community that, really are struggling currently. I really like the environmental committee's letter because they kind of reminded of that less mowing is a really great thing in terms of noise pollution. And there's there's some bummer statistics in the world of how much of our terrain is taken up by turf grass, which is a monocrop, which doesn't feed wildlife and takes a lot of resources. Water, unfortunately, the normalization of pesticides and fertilizer that runs into our, everyone's shared water and can, see more and more algal blooms. That's directly related to that. And those sort of products, they kill beneficial insects and plants that are needed as well. So, I really appreciate it. They kind of foregrounded that. But we can embrace like a sort of restoration and rehabilitation. And I wanted to point out that the ordinance that's being, kind of paused about lawn length, it doesn't have anything to do with a garden. You can still have a garden anywhere in your yard you want. You can have a pollinator habitat, making sure it's native species. And so just really encouraging people to look at there's so many websites and information about how we can just sort of take a lighter hand and a helping hand to them. Looking at the consent agenda, I noticed that there's quite a big amount of money going to the sort of new light installation at that one corner. When that came before the Parks and Rec Commission, we kind of raised a concern about light pollution and thought maybe those can be motion activated for, at least during the wee hours, and still kind of do their job without just adding even more things to confuse wildlife and add to the light pollution. And seeing an upcoming public hearing, kind of a rezoning of agriculture yet again, there has to be a point where we just stop developing, particularly because it ends up with more turf grass, more impermeable surfaces, and we're really, really, at a deficit of green space. And if it just keeps going unabashedly, it's, I think, already think of how many, if there's elderly people around, think of how many butterflies, fireflies you used to see and you don't anymore. There's a reason for things like that. And a lot of it's loss of habitat. So with the dialogue mailer, I'd really like,
30 seconds
feel like
remaining.
something happened. 30 seconds. Oh, one more thing. The dialogue mailer, I think that'd be a great place to promote pollinator-friendly practices. Instead of just yard waste that gets hauled away, it's not the only option, not the best either. We can keep the nutrient loop going, healthy soils, space for habitat, by highlighting things like composting, brush piles, leave the leaves, or as I say to my sister with the large oak tree in her front yard, set yourself free, leave them there. So, miigwech, and I appreciate the no May effort. Pollinator pause. All right.
Thank you. Anybody else in the queue?
No other callers in the queue.
Okay, we'll move on to communications from the mayor and council members. Dr. Altman?
If you have a tree that you admire and would like to honor, there is an opportunity to do so, which is the inaugural and the first annual East Lansing Canopy Champion Challenge. So this is a new initiative from the Sustainability Program in Department of Public Works. The goal is to get people thinking about trees on private property, whether it's your private property or somebody else's. The city's doing what it can to develop our tree canopy on public lands, but we can't get to where we want to be without trees on private property because most of the city is private property. And there's only so much we can do to intervene in how people decide to use their land, whether or not to plant trees, but this is one creative way to get people thinking about trees they admire. So nominations for Canopy Champ are due Friday, April 19th, and then staff will crown the winner, and I imagine there will be photographs on the city website of your favorite tree. And you can submit nominations through cityofeastlansing.com/canopychamp, all one word. Thank you.
Mr. Meadows.
No report this evening, Mayor.
Ms. Watson.
First, I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing people today, so if you could please turn up the volumes on the microphones for me, please. The first thing I wanted to mention is in about a month, we get to vote on the East Lansing Public Schools bond proposal. The vote happens on May 7th, and just wanted to let everyone know in case you like information sessions, there's also things available on the website, but they're holding information sessions next week, April 16th at 6 p.m., as well as the week after, April 25th at 9 a.m. And so you could look for the details on their webpage, but just encourage you to consider the bond, understand what the bond is about, and I also want you to know that this is not about a rate increase for us, but more safety for our kids, not on our... yeah, sure. Whoops. The 6 p.m., April 16th is held at Snell Tower Recreation Center, and then the one on April 25th at 9 a.m. is going to be held at the East Lansing High School Hub. They say enter through door 1. Thank you, no problem. The next thing I wanted to mention is No Mo May. I'm excited to see No Mo May again. I was with council last year when we approved or recommended the No Mo May. I'm excited. I was looking at my lawn today. I'm most likely going to mow my lawn before May 1st because it's looking beautiful. It's loved the rain and loved the sun. And just two things for those that might be concerned about long grass. I am successfully flipping my lawn to a clover lawn, and so clovers are good for the environment, but also they grow short, and so they don't grow as long as grass does. So it's something to consider, and you still see the beautiful green outside. And I've also made my own compost bins at home that I put my leaves in. I have a lot of leaves on the property. It looks like fall eternally on my house alone. And so I just poke some holes in some bins and I can put some leaves in there and then they can just kind of compost down, which is nice. And that'll be all for now. I'll make my other comments as we move through the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Singh.
Yes, thank you. And just wanted to add on to Ms. Watson's comments and the upcoming election in May, that our city clerk and team are recruiting election inspectors. And not only for this election, we have early voting and we have the August primary as well as the election in November. So it's a really critical year that we have to recruit a lot of folks to participate in that early voting as inspectors and support that team. So just wanted to highlight that. More information, you can sign up to volunteer at the clerk's website. I also want to give a big shout out to East Lansing Public Library. It is National Library Week, and as you know, we have the new director that has been on board for I think probably just over a month now, Kevin King. It's also the staff, library staff day as well. I'm really excited and encouraged from the discussions that are happening at the Board of Trustees and with Kevin's leadership, some of the new programs that they plan on supporting and building out STEM supports for our kids and beyond. So keep posted there. There's a lot of exciting things happening. Want to also, to city staff and our city manager, just want to thank you for your continued work on the strategic plan. I'm looking forward to draw that to a conclusion soon as we roll into budget season. This is extraordinary considering it has been many, is that 5 minis? Years since we, the city, have had a strategic plan. I want to also mention, as I'm kind of reporting out this evening, I've had some really encouraging conversations with Michigan State University and looking at deepening our community partnership beyond just a town and gown communication or coordination. So this is deepening a shared strategy. I'm encouraged. I don't have anything formal to report, but I just want to let you know that what I talked about in the fall, I'm still on the case and still working to bring that to fruition with the team here. On the MSU front, I want to mention a couple of things. One, ASMSU reached out to have a meeting focused on the ceasefire, and I know Mr. Sardar, if he's still here, who spoke during public comment regarding that. So I am still getting information and collecting that in from comments. I will say, outside of what I said during the January 8th meeting when that came before us, and what I could see in a resolution that unfortunately was not encouraged to continue working on. But I would say tonight that, when you look at the City of Lansing and what they adopted in their ceasefire resolution, that would be something I would support. So I just wanted to mention that as there is continued communication from our community on that. And with that, I'll cede the floor back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And I will cede the floor to the city manager. I think it's my mic.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple announcements. The Emerging Leaders Program is now accepting applications. The Emerging Leaders Program is an 8-month course in civic engagement designed to expose interested residents to different aspects of local government, and you can apply at cityofeastlansing.com/emerging leaders. Second item is the Planning and Zoning Division will be hosting a meeting titled Dream, Play, Build this Thursday at 5:30 at the Hannah Community Center to discuss the city's forthcoming comprehensive plan updates. This is an interactive workshop designed for community members. I also wanted to shout out congratulations to the Water Resource Recovery Facility for winning the Michigan Water Environment Association's Pump Award. It's the Premier Utility Management Performance Award is given to those utilities that demonstrate excellence in water resource recovery in the state of Michigan and exhibit 2 or more of the effective utility management attributes sought. The WRF had 5. And then lastly, in front of each of the council members is the preliminary fiscal year 2025 budget. We have our first budget work session on April 16th at 5 p.m. here at the Hannah Community Center, and then again on April 23rd at 5 p.m. Thank you very much.
City Attorney's report. Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda. Mr. City Manager.
All right, there's 13 items on tonight's consent agenda. 3.1 is approve the following appointments or reappointments to
Actually,
board.
we took that off the.
Oh, I'm sorry. 3.2, approve a resolution proclaiming April 26, 2024 as Arbor Day in the City of East Lansing. 3.3 is approve policy resolution 2024-7, a resolution to support a No Mow May initiative in the City of East Lansing. 3.4 is approve a street closure request for the East Lansing Art Festival for Albert Avenue, from Albert Avenue Garage to Bailey Street, Mack Avenue from East Lansing Marriott entrance to Grand River Avenue intersection, Grove Street south from the south edge of 7-Eleven entrance and Bailey's surface parking lot, and approve the use of amplified sound and regulation of art festival vendors from 5 a.m. on May 17th to 10 p.m. on May 19th. 3.5 is set a public hearing date of May 14, 2024 to consider ordinance 1527, an application from George F. Ide Family LLC and Leo Brown Group LLC to rezone 2.29 acres vacant parcel immediately north of and to be combined with 3512 Coolidge Road from A, DeWitt Township Agricultural, to B1 General Office Business District. 3.6 is set a public hearing date of May 14, 2024 to consider ordinance 1530, which would amend the zoning ordinance to make changes to items related to electricity. Specifically, the proposed amendments would clarify requirements for electronic display signs, set measurements and fixture standards for outdoor lighting, facilitate solar power generation in East Lansing, and clarify requirements for electric vehicle chargers. 3.7 is approve a proposal from Tetra Tech to perform a DPW facility solar and geothermal assessment and authorize the city manager to sign. 3.8 is approve a 5-year contract with Bound Tree Medical for UCAPIT purchase and rebate program in the amount of $326,000 and authorize the city manager to sign. 3.9 is approve a contract in the amount of $84,175 with Spectrum Construction Services for lighting improvements to William B. Sharp Park and authorize the city manager to sign. Furthermore, approve a project contingency in the amount of $8,418. 3.10 is approve a contract with Johnson Control Fire Protection LP for $37,342.20 to replace the fire alarm panel at City Hall and install 9 additional smoke detection devices. 3.11, approve a conditional Class 3 rental license for an occupancy of up to 2 unrelated persons or a family at 550 Spartan Avenue. The owners of record, according to the assessing records, are Andrew and Lindsay Price, Williamston, Michigan. The applicant is Lindsay Price, Williamston, Michigan. 312 is approve a conditional Class 3 rental license for an occupancy of up to 2 unrelated persons or family at 631 Cornell Avenue. The owner of the record, according to assessing records, is Cornell Place Rentals, LLC, Birmingham, Michigan. The applicant is Kenneth Wallace, Birmingham, Michigan. And 313 is first reading of ordinance 1534, amendments to the regulatory requirements and administrative procedures for operating mobile food vending units in the city of East Lansing.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Meadows for approval. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Singh. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the motion passes unanimously. We now move to a public hearing to consider ordinance 1528, a proposed RO1 residential rental restriction overlay district for a portion of the Glen Karen neighborhood. Do we have a staff presenter? Thank you.
Good evening, Council. You are all familiar with this ordinance, 1528, which is for a proposed rental restriction overlay in a portion of the Glen Karen neighborhood. I do believe that neighbors first started working on this last fall. Just to give a brief timeline, they collected information, met with city staff. There was a neighborhood association or neighborhood meeting, I guess I should say, hosted by staff in October of 2023. The ordinance was introduced by City Council in December of 2023. The Planning Commission meeting, where the public hearing was held for this ordinance, was January 10th of 2024, and again January 24 of 2024. And the Planning Commission did recommend approval by a 6-1 vote, with a note that if the council so chose to consider a possible expansion to the current proposed overlay.
There was also an informational workshop that was held January 17th that was for anyone in the city, not just the Glen Cairn neighborhood, although it was heavily attended, I believe, by many residents in that particular area since they were going through this process at the time. In this current overlay district, there are 149 properties. There are currently 2 licensed rental properties within the current border of the proposed overlay. And we do have 2, what I would say, pending, for lack of a better term, rental applications that had started the process and then halted due to the introduction of this particular ordinance. I'm happy to answer more questions by you all or explain any further procedure with this.
Okay, any questions from council before I open the public hearing? Dr. Altman?
One question, Annette, the expansion, what I'm going to call the expansion areas, possible expansion areas, they all received the same information that residents in the proposed overlay would have received at the hands of the petitioner, correct?
So anyone in the, so say that again, if you would, Councilmember Altman.
We noticed all the people in the expansion area about this meeting tonight.
About this meeting, yes.
And they also got information in the mail about how these things work.
Yes, they received information about the public hearings with the Planning Commission along with information about rental restriction overlays and the procedure.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council?
I recall you mentioning 2 halted. Was it 3 different people that wanted to rent their properties that it was halted, that got it halted on?
We did have 3 pending applications. We currently only have 2. One of them has withdrawn.
And then the 2 is, I know we talked about this before, but please refresh my memory. Is there a policy that points to the halting for their rental application?
There is. It's a part of the rental restriction overlay ordinance itself that does state that if any application is in process at any point in that process, that once the overlay ordinance is introduced, it halts that process for the license.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council? Go ahead, please.
Under our current ordinance, we're allowed to rent, like on a sabbatical up for 2 years, correct?
Yeah, an owner can have a house sitter or house sitting, yes, for up to a 2-year period within 5 years.
And then if for some reason that would be extended a year, is there a way for them to continue? Like if they have a 3-year appointment, that's something that's different than just a 2-year period?
Currently, our ordinance does not allow for an extension of time except for those who are serving in the military.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, I'm now going to declare the public hearing open to consider Ordinance 1528, a proposed R01 residential rental restriction overlay district for a portion of the Glen Cairn neighborhood. I have a number of cards of people that I think want to speak. Ms. Newton.
Thank you so much. My name is Sally Newton. I live at 939 Sunset Lane. And my husband and I have been in the neighborhood for 42 years. And we ask other residents to identify how many years they have been in the neighborhood as well. And I think our most senior is in 70-plus years. But young people who are settling in our neighborhood are there for the very same reasons that my husband and I have been here in Glen Cairn. We are an economically diverse, desirable area, close to schools, parks, downtown, restaurants, and the businesses that we support, as well as MSU campus. Neighbors know each other. They care about each other. We're walkers and dog walkers and bikers and kids watching kids walk to the bus in the morning or to Glen Cairn School. We organize and support fundraisers at all different levels of our community. We are part of the 39% home ownership stock, committed stewards invested in the success of our city. We are now targets for Airbnb and Vrbo, as well as other for-profit vendors. In December, we clearly expressed opposition of rentals in our residential community. We have utilized the tools and platform provided by the city while following the overlay process. It is time to move forward by passing the ordinance 1528. Thank you so much for your time and your commitment to the city.
Mr. Lipinski?
Thank you. Jeff Lipinski, 601 North Lawn, 25 years. I guess listening to the folks here and thinking about 25 years ago when we sought out a neighborhood, I don't think we're unique in seeking something that is a neighborhood that's stable, that's walkable, safe for our kids, close to schools, close to library. And I think that still holds true. I think the ordinance presented by the city gives residents the ability to stabilize their neighborhood. I think the term was used in the information meeting by Annette. And as she pointed out, the residents followed the ordained procedure. They gathered the signatures. They presented to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission recommended approval. So I'm hoping that you will follow that recommendation and approve this overlay. Thank you.
Thank you. Beverly Bonning?
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to address the City Council about the overlay district proposal and your service as City Council members. We truly appreciate that. And I think I can speak on behalf of a number of individuals in this room that no matter how the vote turns out tonight, we really want to express our gratitude to the staff as well for all of the work that they did in this process. It was really remarkable given how much work they have to do. My husband, Jeff, who just spoke, and I reside on North Lawn Avenue at the corner of Roxburgh and Glen Cairn. Our home is in an overlay district, but directly across the street and to the east of us is not. I support the R01 overlay district for many of the same reasons you're going to hear tonight from others, but I'd like to give a more global perspective about this in the context of the strategic plan for housing in the City of East Lansing. In 2021, a housing strategic plan was presented to the City Council and by all appearances was well received. And for those unfamiliar with the plan, a third-party consultant retained by the city developed with city staff and officials a housing strategic plan to assist with the housing policy, housing development, marketing ideas, to support and attract new residents and new developers. The report identified a three-prong approach that would work towards improving housing availability and affordability. Rentals and home ownership are not mutually exclusive concepts here, but rather both are important elements of a multi-pronged approach to assist with availability and affordability. But particularly for first-time home buyers in East Lansing, it's essential that the city maintain a pool of affordable homes for purchase. In the strategic plan, rental restriction overlay districts were not identified as an impediment. No, they were instead identified and encouraged to continue because it provides a mechanism to provide a pool of affordable homes for first-time home buyers. I also had a chance to take a look at the expansion district, and in my letter to you, I outlined last Friday some of the numbers pertaining to the homes within this district, and I've now expanded it based upon city assessor's records of the northeastern part of Glencairn. And what do we have there for homes? Over a third of the homes in this area are 2 to 3 bedroom homes with 1 to 1.5 bathrooms. And when you add or look at the assessed value of all those homes, the assessed values, almost 40% of the original properties in the overlay have $125,000 assessed value or less, and in the added properties, 84%. So those homes that I've just identified are really essential to maintaining a pool for first-time home buyers in East Lansing. And that pool is really small. Our own children recently experienced that trying to buy a home in East Lansing and ended up choosing Okemos only because of availability and affordability. Today, those homes I've just identified are vulnerable to short-term rentals and long-term student rentals because when they're offered in the real estate market, because of the number of bedrooms, baths, and assessed value, they become attractive to potential investors. And that is what's going to change our neighborhood. Your approval of an overlay district tonight, we hope, will maintain the pool of affordable homes for first-time home buyers, like Jeff and I 25 years ago, particularly for those who work in East Lansing and they want to live here. There are essential workers, there are MSU employees, there are public safety officers, and public school employees. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Patrick Dixon?
Thank you. I've been here 37 years, raised 3 kids here. I'll be really quick. I've handed out 2 things earlier. One was built on what Eric Altman found that was very confusing in the document, city code. And a lot of the misunderstanding that arose was because of that. I mean, people had legitimate questions, is this allowed or not? I think the city employees deserve a tremendous appreciation. They have really put it together. There's a nice brochure, a colorful path, and so forth. And so that's a beneficial outcome of this process, however it goes. In terms of the other comments, having a good school system is essential for a good community. Having people who live in homes and raise kids here is also, contributes to that, and they pay taxes and so forth. So that's a part of it. The other thing I did was to provide a little map with a little yellow drawing of where this district was. And again, there were some questions, what are the boundaries? What it showed was that this part of Glencairn fits just like a jigsaw puzzle. It's not like some kind of a odd piece. And the people in the district are open to, and the city council has the power to expand it a bit. And most people are asking to get in, not to avoid it. So that speaks well of it. My last comment is simply this has been extremely informative, but a very long and difficult process for people to gather the signatures and all of that. I can't think of any additional information that's going to come forward that would affect your decision. And I recommend you vote as soon as possible to approve this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike French?
Thank you. My name is Mike French. I live at 321 Clarendon in the proposed overlay district. I also want to quickly thank the City Council, the Planning Commission, the City Planner, the Manager, City Attorney for answering questions and guiding the community through this debate. I particularly appreciated the rental overlay informational forum that was presented a few months ago and the questions and discussion that generated, from which I learned a great deal, so thank you again. I rise once again to frame my opposition to the proposed Glen-Caron R1 overlay. I want to highlight that in my review of the comments from my neighbors who support the overlay, that they present essentially two arguments. First, that the fear of potential short-term rental usage of homes in our neighborhood is growing. And second, that the fear of student rentals encroaching in the neighborhood is also growing. I say again, the fear of both those outcomes, presented with little more than a handful of new license requests to support these conclusions. I'm glad to report that in the latter concern, my neighbors can rest easy. There are no more student rental licenses to be had that allow any more than 2 unrelated occupants or 1 family. The city simply does not issue Class 4 licenses anymore. Having dispelled that fear, it leaves us with the issue of short-term rentals like Airbnb and VRBO. If the city thinks that the simple fear of these short-term rental innovations is enough to execute their police power and rezone my property, then so be it. If the city also thinks that the proposed rental overlay district meets the many tests of good urban planning and responsible zoning, then so be it. However, I submit to you that this plan does not meet the test of good zoning practice. It was originally conceived by arbitrarily drawing lines that crisscross and bisect the northeast corner of Glen-Caron, creating 2 distinct zoning districts within the interior of a long-established neighborhood. Now, it is my understanding that this district is to be expanded to include the other side of Clarendon, which is good in a way, given that this proposal now accurately reflects the boundaries of a neighborhood. However, now my confusion extends beyond the original petition of some of my neighbors to the entire city council, which has concluded that this policy is so important that not only should it be implemented, but also it should be expanded. And if rezoning is so necessary, then what is the position of the city's planning and zoning department, of which I've yet to hear a recommendation? Given their expertise, I would think their consultation would be advisable. If the fear of short-term rentals is so great that it will rise to the level of being addressed in the coming months, either by council or planning and zoning, or at the next master plan update, then please do not irrevocably rezone my property to fix this problem. Allow the open and public process of master plan updating to craft the solution with the advice and guidance of the city planner. After all, the municipal police power and the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act can, but don't need to be, reactionary, fear-driven public policy tools. They should exist so communities can employ expertise to strategize for their future through thoughtful consideration and deliberation. Not because a local resident with a pen decides to outline one part of a neighborhood at the exclusion of other areas. This is not good planning policy or practice. I will note that planning policy can be reactive, as in the case with the 2004 backlash to student housing rental growth in traditional single-family neighborhoods, a full 20 years ago. That reactive policy arose from a very real problem, not an imagined one. The overlay districts were a stopgap measure to prevent the spread of rental licenses. But ultimately, now 20 years later, taking Class 4 licenses off the table for property owners is what curtailed the spread of rentals. Even now, the only suitable license available today that could be considered by an absentee owner are Class 2 licenses, which permit, or Class 3, which permit rental to 2 unrelated parties. I submit to you that these overlay districts and their harsh restrictions are not necessary in a neighborhood of 3, 4, and 5-bedroom homes with a decades-long history of being purchased by single families. I appreciated the comments of Planning Commissioner Denault, who stated the overlay proposal was a sledgehammer solution and voted against referring the proposed overlay back to City Council. And conversely, I am disappointed in the other planning commissioners who voted to refer this matter back to you without putting voice to their reason for doing so. If you plan to vote in the affirmative to adopt the rental overlay in Glen-Caron, then I look forward to your reasoned and detailed explanation as to why this restriction is necessary, because there are a lot of people in the proposed overlay district that reject this plan, would not sign the petition, and even several who asked to have their names retracted from the petition after learning more about its restrictive policies. These many neighbors of mine, as well as my family,
30 seconds remaining.
deserve an explanation as to why the municipality is evoking their police power in this way. I would like you to consider this analogy. Imagine the Glen-Caron neighborhood as a vibrant garden, where each house represents a carefully planted flower or shrub. But with overly restrictive zoning, it's as if the gardeners have decided that no new plants will ever be added, leaving the landscape stagnant and devoid of the capacity for growth. The potential for renewal and change is suppressed, and the community risks becoming trapped in a static state, unable to adapt to changing needs and aspirations. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Newton.
Jim Newton, 939 Sunset Lane, 42 years a resident of Glencairn neighborhood. I am in support of the overlay. Overlays, frankly, they work. I'm showing you a map of the City of East Lansing. And this represents the core of the City of East Lansing and the rental properties that are indicated by the different colors. You'll notice that there is a gap in the Chesterfield Hills area, and there is a gap in the Bailey neighborhood. This is because overlays work. The blue are single-family residences that have been converted to rentals.
Okay, thank you.
And you'll notice how many blue areas you see. This does not represent areas that are east of Hagedorn or in the Flower Pot, which have a number of rental properties. There are currently 20 overlay districts in the City of East Lansing, and I'm not aware of any overlays that have been repealed, and that alone is evidence that they work. There are numerous exceptions to rental properties. The ordinances have a number of exceptions that would allow people, for very practical reasons, to have somebody live with them in their house. We are not completely insensitive to renters. The most current U.S. Census showed that the investor-owned rental housing in East Lansing is over 60% of the housing stock. I'm going to refer to the strategic report that Beverly mentioned also, Ms. Bonning, from 2021, and said the purpose of rental overlay districts are to help preserve the attractiveness, desirability, and privacy of residential neighborhoods by precluding all or certain types of rental properties and thereby avoiding potential impacts rental properties can have on a neighborhood with regard to property deterioration, increased density, congestion, noise, traffic levels, and the reduction of property values. It goes on to say, we recommend the continued utilization of overlay districts to encourage reinvestment in neighborhoods. Dr. Alice Drager, in discussing the benefits of the overlay in Oakwood, said the result of our overlay is what I think is a useful depression of house prices over here. It has kept houses affordable to individuals and families looking to buy houses. People who could not otherwise afford historic houses so close to campus can afford them here in Oakwood. And this has made our neighborhood a more diverse economically as well as racially and ethnically. It has brought children to East Lansing Public Schools who otherwise might not have made it into the district, because these houses were often bought by families with school-aged children. This overlay was approved by the Housing Commission, the Planning Commission, and now we're asking the City Council to approve it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Chris, is it McGee?
Good evening. I live at 418 Clarendon since 2009. It's one of the homes that was referred earlier as affordable, 3-bedroom, 2 bathrooms. So it's been 15 years. I'll start with the end. I urge the council to vote no on this. We're one of the houses on the north side of Clarendon that's, I understand, included in the expansion based on, I presume, what's now a minority of signatures of all the 159 homes. So the reality that we lived in the last 15 years, we're 159 houses, of which 2 are rentals. One of them happens to be our neighbor. We share a fence. I witnessed the process. We were asked, whether we agree or not. We at the time didn't think we had anything against, knowing that, again, as Mike French and others pointed out, there are rules in place to prevent rentals to students, and so it's either a family or two unrelated. So what we've witnessed over the years, renters who I would venture a guess would otherwise would not afford to buy into East Lansing. I mean, it's not cheap to buy houses in East Lansing. So there were families with little kids, who came to, I presume, work here, who rented. And, we coexisted. It was all good. And again, last 15 years, we're talking about 169 houses, 2 rentals, 2. So I don't understand exactly what problem we're trying to solve here. There are limitations in place. What this will do, the only thing I think will do, is will not allow people like my renter neighbors to be in our neighborhood, who are families who, again, I'm guessing they would not afford to buy a house, but they can afford to rent on a house on Saginaw, which is relatively cheap. So I will use some words here that might not sound very pleasant to others, but I feel like this is going to be a discriminatory, perhaps a racist policy. Not intended, but that will be the result, I believe, by basically not allowing some families or, two unrelated to have access to live as renters in the city. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you. Rachel, is it Overby? Overly? I'm sorry. Transposing lines. Is it Tim?
Tim Darsh.
Darsh, yeah, sorry.
Hey, everybody. I've been in East Lansing for 25 years as a student, as a rental over on Cornell, which had 2 approvals tonight for rentals, and now in Glen Cairn at 414 Clarendon Road. I'm here to voice my opposition to the rental overlay district being proposed in the Glen Cairn neighborhood. I do not believe that the people that have lived in the neighborhood since the times of it being a red line district, who pay the lowest tax rate and who will not be alive in 10, 15, or 20 years, should be able to shackle young families with not being able to decide what to do with their own properties now or in the future. I feel that this proposal by a few families is based off of racial and income inequality. The mechanism that is being used to propose the rental overlay district by neighbors that has been revised from the original overlay boundary to its newly redrawn boundary is a bait and switch tactic. My home was not originally part of the plan and is now somehow in this plan and redrawn to include my home without my input or anybody asking me to sign anything. And I would agree with Chris, we have rentals behind us, have no problems with any of the rentals around us. The city already has numerous mechanisms in place to control many aspects of our lives through code enforcement, and I do not feel more restrictive rules that the city needs to spend money on to enforce is fiscally responsible. I ask the council to vote no for this proposal and any future proposal that allows a small minority of homeowners to tell other homeowners what they can and cannot do with their property. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Robin Dixon.
Good evening. My name is Robin Dixon, and I live at 1045 Rosewood Avenue here in the Glen Cairn neighborhood of East Lansing. I thank you all for this opportunity to address the council again on the topic of the proposed RO1 overlay in Glen Cairn, Ordinance 1528. I speak strongly in favor of its adoption and urge the council to vote in favor of its approval tonight. This is the remaining puzzle piece necessary to protect the peace and tranquility we enjoy in our neighborhood. I do not wish to take your valuable time to repeat what I have previously said over the past 6 months, addressing you, the City Council, the Planning Commission, and the Housing Commission. Indeed, that the agenda item report for this issue is 110 pages long speaks to the great amount of public attention and comment this topic has already garnered. Rather, I will simply draw attention to two statements directly from that report. One, the Planning Commission voted 6-1 to recommend approval of the proposed overlay at its January 24th, 2024 meeting. And the second thing directly out of that agenda item report, the current request is valid in that it meets the following requirements. Now, I won't repeat all of them here, but there are 10 of them, as is nicely demonstrated by the city staff's very careful infographic. Again, we are at 10, and now we're actually at 11. And it isn't just a minority of members of our neighborhood, I believe, who support this overlay proposal. In fact, in these procedures, we had to get 2/3 majority signatures, 2/3 of 149 households. Now, many people are not perhaps in a household, so it's only one person per household. So it isn't just that one person, but also other members of the household who are likely in favor of this as well, those who signed. In any case, 110 pages, that's a lot of consideration, and I really believe that now is the time to act. I urge the council to approve this RO1 for our neighborhood tonight, and again, I thank you all for this careful consideration and that you've given this issue.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wants to address the council during the public hearing? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. This comes back for the council for, I guess, questions for staff, for city attorney, if there are any, or any further action either tonight or to move it to another meeting for a final decision. Any comments from the city council? Dr. Altman?
If I may, I would like to move approval of Ordinance 1528 as detailed on the agenda and as indicated in our packet.
Support. Okay, moved by Altman and second from Meadows. And the motion is to approve Ordinance 1528. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Discussion from council. Any discussion? Go ahead, Ms. Watson, please.
Does your motion include the houses in the red or also includes the other ones?
That was going to be my next motion, is to
Okay.
make an amendment.
Thank you.
Well, so does it approve the houses, or does it include the houses in the red?
If I may, Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment to my original motion.
Could you just answer my question
Yes.
to keep me unconfused, please?
Yes. Ordinance 1528 includes the houses in the red.
Okay.
So
Which is the
that's-
diagram we have.
Correct.
Okay. And now you want to amend your own motion?
Correct. I would like to move an amendment to expand the proposed overlay. And I'm going to refer to the map on page 2 of the staff report, which is a public document so people can follow along. There's a region outlined in blue dots that generally would expand the overlay north to Saginaw and east to Abbott.
Okay, you've moved to amend your motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Right. Any discussion on the amendment?
If I may, Mayor, I'd like to address my
For sure.
amendment. So the enabling ordinance allows us to expand a proposed overlay. One of the criteria is whether the expansion is logical. I believe that this expansion is logical for a couple of reasons. Without the expansion, the overlay as proposed, the region just in the red, appears to leave a couple of regions that are too small on their own to qualify for the enabling ordinance. There's the region north of Oxford and the region south of Oxford, and by my count, neither of them has the 50 parcels necessary to qualify for an overlay. So I think that's one reason that this expansion is logical. We've heard speakers address how the proposed overlay bisects streets in ways that may not make a ton of sense. It's also the case that residents in these expansion areas were noticed about this meeting, and I think there's been plenty of time for them to sort of absorb the information. It's also something we've been talking about for a while. And the feedback we've gotten back has generally been positive. So we received 8 letters by email in support, 1 phone call in support, and then 1 speaker in support. And by my count, there are 1 no by email and 2 by speaker. So the proportion of support within these areas is quite high. So I think there's ample reason to consider this a logical expansion.
Okay, any further comment on the motion to amend?
I have remarks.
Go ahead, please.
I will not be voting in favor of this overlay district for the following reasons. I think we hold a lot of power here on council to be able to expand overlay districts, but not reduce them. And that's problematic. It shouldn't lie in our hands that we can expand it by as much as being proposed when the initial overlay district, you have to have that 2/3 signature. It would be nice to see a mechanism where someone can sign yes or sign no so that we can see what the true layout is of not just the folks that want this, but the folks that don't want this. In the 80s and mid-90s, I was at home growing up in a red line neighborhood. And so we were guided differently at that time. And it means something different to hear and think about what the times were like for the people that were able to live here during that time, 80s and mid-90s, and those that were not able to move into this city of East Lansing. Black and brown people rent at higher rates for their entire lives than our white counterparts. And so again, like someone mentioned, it's the intention and also the impact of these type of rules that we have to think about. And you're not just keeping out the students, you're also keeping out families and black and brown people and young people that want to rent in this area. Rent prices are so doggone high that we like to tell folks you can save money and then buy a home, and that is not the case. We had people, if it was last week, let us know that a new management company raised their rental prices by about 10 to 20% upon renewal. So they can't save, but then if they want to live here, they can't rent here either. I would like to see changes in also the ability of people to rent throughout the year. This city is stacked for student renters. So as I've talked about my own stories and know of people, if you were looking for a place to rent outside of the school year, then you're not going to find a place to rent. And then you can't find a house to rent because we have overlay districts, and then you're, located in another city. And speaking of our school of choice children, when you think of your school of choice families, I wonder why they don't live here. And I don't think it's because they don't want to. This area is unaffordable, and it is very difficult to find a place to live, to rent, or to own if you don't make above a certain income. The next things I wanted to mention is we do, like some of the speakers said, we have noise ordinances. We have PACE officers to address concerns for our renters and also our homeowners. And I live on a busy street. If my doppelganger from 2014 was looking for a home right now, we wouldn't be here. I've mentioned this before, and my home equity has gone up, but I live around renters, and we managed to make it work. And that's because I don't come from a background where we know who's renting and who's owning. And if they're too loud, we do neighborly things, and I have discussions with them, and they can have discussions with me. Sometimes my music is loud too, and I own my home. Owning your home is an opportunity to build wealth, and we're at this place in the city where I think if you look at, my theory is if you look at former overlay districts that have been in place, and you look at those parcels of who's included in it, the hands have changed. And so what that means is folks were able to put us into eternity on a decision that it's difficult to repel and should sunset. And so overlays could be fine for a period of time for people that want it, but we change, like generations that aren't settled into their homes yet, they want opportunities to be able to rent sometimes and then come back to their homes, or they want opportunities to build their wealth. And when we have these forever clauses like these overlay districts, it's scary that people were able to make those decisions and that they don't sunset or anything like that. And so I find that problematic. I think neighborhood choice is okay, but what happens to the next neighbors and the next neighbors and their choices on this matter? And those are all the reasons that I'm going to give for why I'm going to be voting no on this.
Okay, any other discussion with regard to the motion to amend the main motion?
Well, I would like to just respond to that last comment. I'll just note that the ordinance actually provides that you can use the exact same process to change the overlay district. So it is not written in stone forever, and new members within that community could circulate a petition to change that or eliminate it.
Thank you. I don't think it's fair to place it in the lap of the neighbors to have to come back and fight with each other and go back and forth. Things can just be flatly revisited. When a certain group of people get to make a decision, I think then it should be leveled after a period of time, and then it's revisited and the option is there again, but not that it pits the people who are saying no or who have said no and make no kind of list against the people that got their 2/3 and then some.
Any further discussion on the motion to amend the main motion? I have some discussion. I'm going to vote against the amendment. By my count, the amendment would add 85 total properties, many of which are on major arteries such as Saginaw and Abbott, and I don't believe that the addition of those properties is in compliance with the purposes of section 50-773 of the zoning ordinance, in that I don't think the addition of those properties has any significant effect in terms of precluding the deleterious effects of rental properties with respect to property deterioration, increased density, congestion, noise and traffic levels, and reduction of property values. I look at many of those properties already having issues involving traffic, et cetera, and I think it unnecessary at this point to add those in. So I'll be voting no on the motion to amend the main motion. Okay, any further discussion on the motion to amend the main motion?
I have a
Please.
question to that point, Mayor, and the prior motion on, or I'm sorry, the current motion we're discussing. The houses that fall outside, do they fall into any neighborhood?
Well, what do you mean by any neighborhood?
Because we got 2/3 of the 100, there was 2/3 of the signatures collected of the 149 homes. We've since the additional areas were noticed, and we have received public comment via email. But if those surrounding areas were interested in being included into an overlay, their recourse is to collect 2/3 of signatures for the outlining streets?
Mr. Chubb and Ms. Irwin, can you respond to that?
Ordinance 50-775 sub 2 sub E, after it's moved back to the council from the planning commission, the city council can make additions or changes in the boundaries of the overlay to prevent spot zoning, to include or exclude areas that logically should have been included or excluded in the petition, and to make the boundaries of the proposed overlay district abut boundary lines of other zoning districts and overlay districts. And it does specifically reference in that analysis, and to adopt alternate ordinance in conformity with the suggested changes, whether or not the 2/3 majority requirement of property owners would still be met with those changes. So for increasing the size of the overlay, the 2/3 is not required if it's done pursuant to the analysis on those points that I referenced. Subsection F notes that if the council amends the overlay to fewer parcels of property than the petition sought, the owners of at least 2/3 of the parcels remaining in the overlay district must have signed the original petition. So if it's reduced, the 2/3 does still apply, and we can't reduce it in a way that would get under 2/3, but in increasing it, there is no obligation to seek additional petition or signatures to conform to the 2/3 requirement.
Okay, I may have heard the question a little differently, and I want to segue back to what Mr. Meadows said. I think, you correct me, I think at least part of the Mayor Pro Tem's question was, if we decided not to include these additional properties in this overlay, then could those additional properties petition for an overlay district? And Mr. Meadows' view tonight was there were an insufficient number of, I think you said that, there were an insufficient number of properties.
I did not say that, by the way.
I'm sorry?
I did not say that. I didn't comment on that at all.
Dr. Altman said that?
That was me.
Oh, okay. Well, somebody said that. And so, and both of those somebodies are smarter than I am, so.
Sure,
So I guess I'd like to have you answer that question, please.
Yeah, so to the extent I misheard the question, I apologize. But yeah, so the one requirement, or one of the requirements for initiation of another petition would be that it has at least 50 houses that all meet these requirements. And so I'm not clear on what that would allow with the remainder, which is to say the increased area as proposed by the ordinance, or the motion to amend the ordinance.
And the increased area is 85 homes.
Well, that's by the Brookover count tonight. I don't, you know,
According to the mayor.
I flunked college math, so. Dr. Altman.
The Altman count had 49 homes in the property north of Oxford, 49 parcels, and 48 south of Oxford. So assuming that those are two separate regions, and each would be a hair short of qualifying.
It's helpful.
If I can comment.
Please.
I would. I'll be voting for the amendment, and part of the reason is that, you know, I've walked this neighborhood 20 times and knocked on everybody's door there that many times, and this is the neighborhood. The red area, the blue area, which exclude, the current proposal excludes part of Clarendon, does address the properties on Saginaw and on Abbott. And to your point, Mr. Mayor, I'll just note that other overlay districts within the community also have busy streets that they encompass. And those are areas which often are areas that are under the most challenge for rental housing or conversions within the city. When I look at the map that we have that includes this red area and the blue area, I'm looking at a single neighborhood. And I think logically that we should proceed to include that single neighborhood within this overlay district. To me, this makes perfect sense in the sense that we've also heard from numerous people who live in the what I'll call the excluded area, the area which did not have the petition circulated within it, who wish to be in this overlay district. I haven't heard very many people actually oppose the overlay district, although the ones we've heard tonight did so very articulately, and I want to compliment you all for your presentations on it. But I think this is a logical extension, something that we built into the ordinance itself. I think I'm the only one up here who has been here from the beginning of this. We began this in 1995 when we saw that there was an extreme spread of rental housing within the neighborhoods, and there was a great disruption within our neighborhoods. So we looked to at least stabilize those neighborhoods through Ordinance 900, which reduced the number of unrelated individuals who could live together from 4 to 2. We thought that economically that would not, in any sense in the future, make it very lucrative to turn houses into rental houses within the City of East Lansing, but the value of property and the rents continued to rise, and we saw that there was a continuous and expanding number of applications for rental housing within the neighborhoods. That's when we came up with the overlay zones. It's a democratic process. It's actually a majorly democratic process because it requires 2/3 of the individuals within a proposed overlay district to sign a petition and ask that it be done in whatever category has been circulated. I think it has worked pretty well in our community. This area being excluded was a surprise to me. I actually thought it was an overlay zone. And it may have been proposed for one at some point in the past, and maybe I heard about it, and it just never came to fruition. But this, with the blue area, what I'll call the blue area and the red area, to me is a neighborhood, and I think the people within this area consider themselves to be a neighborhood, whether they live on Saginaw or whether they live on Abbott Road. This is the area that they consider to be their neighborhood, and I think it's logical for us to extend it into those circumstances. I'll just note, Ordinance 900 was challenged by the landlords, they lost the lawsuit. The overlay districts were challenged by the landlords, they lost the lawsuits. The people in these neighborhoods have a democratic process to establish a zone within their neighborhoods that restricts rental licensing. And I think it's something that we should be proud of. Also note that Ordinance 900, after it was, the courts approved it, was also adopted in other college towns all throughout the state of Michigan. So I think we've been a leader on this, and I think we should continue to be, and I will be voting for this amendment and the main motion.
Okay, any further discussion on the amendment? We have a roll call vote on the amendment, please.
Yes.
Councilmember Meadows?
Yes.
Councilmember Watson?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Singh,
Yes.
Mayor Brookover.
No. Okay, now we move to the main motion as amended. Any further discussion on the main motion as amended? Go ahead.
Yep. So a couple things. One, because I know it was asked, and I want to, what was helpful during the discussion on the prior amendment was knowing that the two outlying areas were under the 50 house. And I would like us to be consistent, and there is recourse, outside of what we may or may not do tonight, moving forward on the full district. But I just wanted to explain that piece. Secondly, on the overall, I think, initiative or, adopting the overlay tonight, I think, one, the reality that, the City of East Lansing, because of the large university that we have in our community, is not an open market. And we have to be thoughtful in terms of the interventions that we do to support our neighborhood and neighborhoods and community. And, and I'm going to make this comment, it's not all landlords, but some, if there was an open, where people could have rentals without some of the overlay provisions, we would have some predatory landlords where people would not still have the economic threshold to rent in the community. That, I think, is a reality to the community. Now, that's not to say that we have work to do on housing and housing options in our community, and I really appreciate the comments during public comment regarding the 2021 housing study. I've referenced that even the regional planning has done a recent study just this past year that we are 1,100 housing units short at a variety of economic threshold, and that's where I would really like to see our council and city focus on over the next 5 years to provide some real options at a variety of price points. So tonight I will be supporting the overlay, and I could go into more history, but I think Mr. Meadows covered that for the evening. I want to say that I think I've said my piece, so I'll let it go at that.
Okay, any other further discussion on the main motion?
Yes, Mayor.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I want to thank petitioners for their efforts on this. I think you've done something important for the city and not just for the neighborhood. And I also want to thank the city staff for their work, both on managing the process. There's a lot of interaction with a lot of people, but then also the communication splits in January, as some of the speakers have mentioned, I think was extraordinarily helpful, and I thought it was a great example of responsive government. We had questions from the community, staff leapt into action even though they had lots of other stuff to do, and I think that was a really important step. So I'm going to support this measure for a couple of different reasons. One does concern process. We heard process from a speaker. The code makes this mechanism available to the community and sets a high bar for success, right? You have to get the 2/3 majority, and there's an education requirement, so it's a lot of work. And so then if people avail themselves of this mechanism, I think we owe them considerable deference. And that doesn't mean that I couldn't imagine, actually I can't imagine, but in principle, we could vote to override or to deny an overlay, but in my view, the reason for that would have to be compelling and spelled out in some detail. I don't think that any overlays have been denied in the history of overlays, but there have been a couple of 3-2 votes, which is to say that it matters who sits in these seats if you want one of these. So that's the process argument. I also support them based on substance. I think they're good policy. I think these overlays are good policy. And we know that neighborhoods only go one way. They go from owner-occupied to rental. They don't go in the other direction. The city has tried various things to make that happen, and it just doesn't happen. And our owner occupancy rate is low, as some speakers have mentioned. It's 39.7% in the 2020 census, and I don't think we want this to drop. These things work. Mr. Newton had a map. He called out a gap in the Bailey neighborhood. Well, I live in that gap, and I don't think I would live in that gap if it weren't for these policies that have kept the peace for the past 23 years that we've lived there. We do absolutely need more family-oriented detached rental housing. That is a critical need. And rental housing for moderate income people, this is a real problem. But the shortage of that is not due to overlays. It's not due to our rental restriction properties. It's due to the market that we live in, as the Mayor Pro Tem mentioned. We could sunset all the overlays in the city tomorrow, and we wouldn't get a whole lot more family-oriented detached rentals. We would get a lot of student rentals, and we would get a lot of party rentals, because that's where the money is. That's what the market is driving. We also have no control over what happens to a rental license once we approve it. And so a landlord may have good intentions to rent to a particular category of people, but that's against the law. You can't rent to a category of people. That violates our ordinance. You can't discriminate against people because they're students. So it's trickier than it sounds. I want to talk a little bit about the definition of family that is at the core of the policy, because it's important to understand what that definition does for us, and because I see it as a value statement, an important value statement. The definition of family plays a central role in these overlays because people living together as a family don't need a rental license. So their lives aren't impeded when a rental restriction overlay goes into effect. So if you want to minimize the burden on homeowners in an overlay, in terms of who they can live with and how they can use their property, you want a broadly inclusive definition of a family. And Mark and his colleagues 25 years ago pulled this off at a time when not everybody was thinking in terms of inclusive families. Okay, thinking 25 years ago, we had don't ask, don't tell, for those of you who remember that. The country was in a very different place. And this was a very forward-thinking policy, and it put East Lansing way ahead of everybody else. So I want to do an encore code reading, if everybody, I hope, has the patience. And I want to read from the definition of family in the zoning code. This is Section 50-6. Section 50 is our zoning ordinance, and subsection 6 is the definitions. So family has a bunch of components, and I want to start with the first one. Family means one person or two related persons or two unrelated persons residing in a dwelling unit, or where there are more than two persons residing in a dwelling unit. Persons classified as constituting a family shall be limited to husband, wife, son, daughter, father, mother, brother, sister, grandfather, grandmother, grandson, granddaughter, aunt, uncle, stepchildren, and legally adopted children, or any combination of the above persons living together in a single dwelling unit. And elsewhere in the code, we add nephews and nieces, okay? So this is great. This covers a lot. It's biological and legal relationships, right? So that covers a lot, but leaves some things out. Like, what about an unmarried couple with a child? Okay, that would not fit. Or some other family relationship that the law hasn't caught up with yet, right? And that's important. That was an issue before marriage equality, right? It's maybe not so much an issue now, unless the Supreme Court does things we don't want it to do. But at one time, this was an issue. And East Lansing had that covered because of the domestic unit provision, okay, which is a subsection under the definition of family. So I want to read that too. Okay? Domestic unit, colon. As herein defined, a domestic unit shall be given the same rights and privileges and shall have the same duties and responsibilities as a family, as defined herein for purposes of construing and interpreting this chapter, which is the zoning code. Domestic unit shall mean a collective number of individuals living together in one dwelling unit whose relationship is of a regular and permanent nature and having a distinct domestic character, or a demonstrable and recognizable bond where each party is responsible for the basic material needs of the other and all are living and cooking as a single housekeeping unit, which basically means you don't have separate kitchens all over the place as you might have in sort of an apartment type setting. So that covers our unmarried couple with a child and seems to cover any other committed relationship you can imagine. Okay. And in fact, when we did this round of clarification a few months ago, right, when we had these conversations here, people had trouble coming up with examples that did not fit this definition, and they tried, okay, and some of the scenarios got a little contorted. So then the worry is this definition now so broad that it lets anything count as a family? And there we look at the next subsection 4 of the definition of family. This definition shall not include any society, club, fraternity, sorority, association, lodge, combine, federation, group, coterie, or organization, nor include a group of individuals whose association is temporary or seasonal in character or nature, or for the limited duration of their education, nor a group whose sharing of a house is not to function as a family, but merely for convenience and economics. Okay. So, so this provision basically excludes student rentals and party rentals. Okay. It also covers and this is important, it also covers situations that we think of as student rentals where the tenants aren't actually paying rent. Okay, and this is a dodge that people use when they buy their child a house, right? And the child is on the deed, and then the child's friends help with the groceries, right? Instead of paying rent. So under this last provision, that's still not a family, and so they need a rental license, and so they're regulated by an overlay. So if you define a rental specifically in terms of actually paying rent, that's not going to work. You're going to see a barter economy emerge, basically. And I guess, although Mark can help with this, that this was one consideration that influenced the architects of this policy to take this family-oriented approach, okay, rather than defining the need for a rental license strictly in terms of paying rent. So this definition of family makes these overlays minimally intrusive on family life in an overlay, and at the same time represents a statement of inclusive values, okay, that I am proud to have in our code. Especially given, as I mentioned before, that this definition is probably about 25 years old and has stood the test of time. So I wanted to delve into this a bit again because understanding these policies and why they work and why they're inclusive is going to be an important source of leverage if we find ourselves having to defend these policies moving forward. And I say that because whenever a new overlay goes into place, some people get frustrated because they want to rent their property. That can go away over time as people adapt or as new people move in and know what they're buying into, right, and look for that. But in the meantime, who knows what's going to happen from the frustrations, and I think that's probably something to bear in mind. Thank you for everybody's indulgence.
Any further discussion?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It just would have been nice to hear from people who have been in their homes 10 years or under. Because, as I said before, I think our needs are different, and we would like similar opportunities. And I think if you look at the parcels and in these overlay districts, and if 2/3 of the parcels have changed hands, then that means that there should be some sunsetting to these rules. It's very possible that people are stuck in overlay districts that the 2/3 have now moved on in some way, shape, or form. And our median, just remind everyone, our median age in the city of East Lansing is 21. Your 21-year-old typically doesn't own their own home. And so, again, just making space for folks that need to rent and want to rent is just as important as the amount of power that our homeowners are given. And that's all, thanks.
Okay, I'm going to vote in favor of the motion as amended, even though I wasn't in favor of the amendment, for the following reasons. First, Section 50-773 of the zoning ordinance indicates the purpose of this overlay district process is to preserve the attractiveness, desirability, and privacy of residential neighborhoods by precluding all or certain types of rental properties and thereby preclude the deleterious effects rental properties can have on a neighborhood with respect to property deterioration, increased density, congestion, noise, and traffic levels, and reduction of property values. Based on the information presented in the record thus far over several months, including the public hearing tonight, I believe those variables in the ordinance are met by this particular overlay district. And then, secondly, the purpose of the districts is to, quote, protect the privacy of residents and to minimize noise, congestion, and nuisance impacts by regulating the types of rental properties, end quote. I believe based on the information presented in the record thus far over these several months, including the public hearing tonight, that particular goal is achieved and is met by this particular overlay district. The ordinance then further indicates that one of the purposes is to maintain an attractive community appearance and to provide a desirable living environment for residents by preserving the owner-occupied character of the neighborhood, end quote. I believe, again, based on the information presented in the record over these several months, including the public hearing tonight, that particular goal is substantiated with regard to the district objective. And then finally, the ordinance provides that it is meant to, quote, prevent excessive traffic and parking problems in the neighborhoods, end quote. I believe based on the information presented in the record thus far over the several months, including the public hearing tonight, that particular variable and requirement of the ordinance has been met. And therefore, based on all of those variables being met, in my judgment, based on the information presented in the record, including the public hearing tonight, I'm going to be voting for this motion. Any other comment? Go ahead, Dr. Ullman.
I just want to thank you, Mayor, for tying that directly to the ordinance and indicate that I concur with your conclusions.
Okay, anything further? Let's have a roll call vote on this, please. This is the main motion as amended.
Councilmember Altman?
Yes.
Councilmember Meadows?
Yes.
Councilmember Watson?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Singh?
Yes.
Mayor Brookover?
Yes. Okay, we're now going to move to the business agenda. Item 5.1, approve a contract with Schindler Elevator Corporation for $111,921 to replace the control unit and related operating mechanics on the lobby elevator at City Hall. Do we need a staff presentation on this, council, or?
No, I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, Meadows approves, Meadows moves that we approve a contract with Schindler Elevator Corporation for $111,921 to replace the control unit and relating operating mechanics on the lobby elevator at City Hall. Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second by the Mayor Pro Tem. Any discussion?
Can we talk after the meeting? Okay. Sure. And I'll go.
I'm going to take a break after this.
I will,
just-
yeah,
okay.
it's okay. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Let's take a 10-minute break, please, people. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting back to order. We're at item 5.2, consideration of approval of the appointment of Michael C. McDaniel to the East Lansing Independent Police Oversight Commission for a full term ending December 31st, 2026. I believe the items are in front of you. I don't think we really need a staff contact on this, unless, Mr. City Manager, you want to?
I know that Elaine Hardy is here, and she was involved in that interview process, I believe.
Come on up, Ms. Hardy, if you want to.
Thank you. So this matter is before council at the request of the staff liaisons to the East Lansing Independent Oversight Commission, who wanted to bring the matter up for discussion on the business agenda as opposed to an appointment on consent. There was some discussion with regard to the appointment by the chairs with the council liaisons.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Do we have a motion?
I'll move approval.
Okay, moved by Council Member Meadows that we approve the appointment of Michael C. McDaniel to the East Lansing Independent Police Oversight Commission for a full term ending December 31st, 2026. Is there a second? I second the motion. All right, discussion. Is there any discussion?
I'm sure I'll discuss. I have something to say, if that's
Please.
okay. So I was not at Mr. McDaniel's interview. I did receive feedback from the two chair, from our chair and vice chair, that we're not in support at this time of Mr. McDaniel's joining us. And Councilmember Meadows was at the interview as well. And Mr. McDaniel is a attorney, and the attorneys all seem to know each other around here. And so they all know each other, like Mayor and Mr. Meadows. And so I will be voting no to support the chair and the vice chair. I was hoping to have more applicants, and we don't. But out of respect for what it is that they're seeing or hearing, and also we've had some back and forth communications, and one of them includes what our East Lansing Independent Police Oversight Commission is about, and the types of commissioners that should be seated. And so I was looking for the mention, since everybody's reading today. I was going to read too, but I don't have it in front of me. But it talks about seating people who come from marginalized communities or have been, and this is just my summary, but mistreated, have historically been mistreated by the police. And so based on what happened during the interviews, and I don't think that Mr. McDaniel fits that. And we are currently looking at a commission that was designed to address racial inequities, that is being led by white people on the commission. And whenever we are talking about inequities, it's important that the people who have been harmed the most are at the table or able to be at the table. And so it was my hope with regard to Mr. McDaniel that we could get other applicants, which again, we did not though. We don't have any applicants in the pool. But just out of, again, an understanding that the people who have had the most harm should be at the table as well. And filling the seat with Mr. McDaniel's further tilts the representation of our East Lansing Independent Police Oversight Commission, whose goal is to address a lot of the racial inequities that happen in policing and talk about accountability to the community for policing. So thanks, everybody.
Okay, any other discussion?
Yes, I made the motion, so I will talk about it. Yes, I've known Mike, I think, for a long time resident of the city of East Lansing. I think an individual whose experience over the years, both as Assistant Attorney General, as I think a dean at Cooley Law School, head of the Michigan National Guard, some position with the Environmental Protection Agency in Washington at some point. Brings a lot of experience and ability to this commission that I think may be overlooked if we were to ignore him at this time. And while I do recognize that both the chair and the vice chair indicated that they were not in support of this appointment at this time, you know, I can't personally support the rationale that was put forward. As I read the chair's email to both myself and Councilmember Watson, he recognizes the value of Mr. McDaniel, but then indicates I can't support his appointment to the commission, as I believe it is crucial we replace Eric with another individual from the BIPOC community. To me, this is an expression that is the opposite of why we actually created this commission, to eliminate any kind of bias or racial decision with regard to appointments or any activity of the City of East Lansing in every single way. And my knowledge of Mike over the years would indicate to me that he is very interested in also rooting out any kind of discrimination, both in policing and in any other way. And I've seen him work towards that end throughout his entire career. So I'm supportive of this at this time. I recognize the points that Councilmember Watson made. She and I have had our own conversation about this, and I have committed, and I think she is committed, to making sure that we have a very good balance on this commission going forward. But this is the individual who has made an application at this point in time, and frankly, I consider us to be lucky to have him having made that application. It's a lot of work, and I think that he's willing to step forward and lend his expertise to this, that ultimately the members of the commission and the chair and vice chair will find that he's a very valuable addition to the debates and the discussion, but also in the oversight of our police agency.
Anything further? I'd like to say this. I'm aware that we have a continuing dialogue about race in this city, and that's a dialogue we need to have. And the disagreements we have in terms of some of the commission appointments and some of the other processes are disagreements that are to be expected when we struggle with these issues. Having said that, Mike McDaniel was good enough for an African-American president and a female governor. He's good enough for me, so I support this appointment.
Mayor, may I?
Go ahead.
I just want to, I'm not an attorney, but I do know Mike McDaniel. I met him about 20-some years ago during Jennifer Granholm, the primary when she was running for governor. And I met him in a T-shirt volunteering, hand in glove with a number of us organizers for that gubernatorial campaign. Flash forward, I moved into the Chesterfield Hills where he was a neighbor. I am very aware of his distinguished career, and I agree that we are fortunate that he's coming forward. I would say, filling these seats on all commissions are so important because that's how we get community dialogue. And so I am saddened that there weren't additional applicants at this time for this board and commission, and maybe we need to continue a formalized conversation and how we're recruiting people to our boards and commissions to fill these seats to represent our community.
Okay, anything further? Dr. Altman?
I'm sorry, I see you look downcast.
It's fine.
I just wanted to mention if
My life has been sort of downcast, but that's a whole different thing.
It's a separate issue. Can't help with that. If memory serves, Mr. McDaniel was also chair of the panel that investigated the ice storm, BWL after the ice storm. Is that correct?
He was, yes.
And there's a record there of sort of community volunteerism that I think is also very important.
Okay. All those in favor of the appointment, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, item 5.3, consideration of approval of a conditional Class 3 rental license review for 854 terrain allowing up to 2 unrelated or a family to occupy the dwelling. The owner applicant is Nicholas Aaron McCahill of East Lansing. You want to go ahead, please?
Mayor, as you have said, this is an application for an initial rental license for a Class 3 rental license, which would allow for up to 2 unrelated persons or a family to occupy or rent this particular unit. You have in your packet information about the property, that it's a fairly recently built property. It's been before you in the past. I want to make note that that was with a different owner. So this is not a continuation of that past application. This is a new application with a new owner. The Housing Commission did review all of the documents, the application, the floor plan, the site plan, the public comment that was written in and submitted. Of course, the Housing Commission had heard public comment with the prior application in addition to this current one. The owner applicant, Mr. Nicholas McCahill, was present and answered questions of the commission and answered their questions related to caretaking of the property and how he will caretake for that property when he no longer lives there or if he is out of the area. As noted, he serves in the military, so I am assuming goes where he is told to go. We did provide all the public comment that was received. The Housing Commission did make recommendation for approval for this conditional rental license with an additional condition, which they've been making a habit of doing, and we may add this to our ordinance. It's up to them to make that, but I just wanted to make note this isn't a special kind of condition as far as the commission's concerned. It's one they've been doing with all of the rental licenses. If the property sells in that first 12-month kind of conditional time period, that the new owner would be on a new 12-month conditional time period. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions of staff? All right. Do we have a motion? All right, for purposes of discussion, I move approval of a conditional Class 3 rental license review. I move approval of a conditional Class 3 rental license for 854 terrain allowing up to 2 unrelated or a family to occupy the dwelling with the condition imposed in terms of if he's no longer living there, then there has to be a property manager. Is that the sufficient condition? Ms.
Yes.
Irwin?
Yes.
Okay. I move that.
Second.
Okay, second from Watson. Now discussion. Any discussion? Go ahead, Dr. Altman.
Thank you. I will not be supporting this application. This particular application, this particular property is in an owner-occupied neighborhood, and it's close to campus, and that makes it different from other conditional Class 3 licenses that we've approved. With reference to Section 50-773 that the mayor has already cited, I believe that granting this application would lead to deleterious effects with regard to property deterioration, increased density, congestion, noise, and traffic levels, and reduction of property values. And I believe that denying this license will help preserve the attractiveness, desirability, and privacy of this neighborhood, and will help to maintain an attractive community appearance and to provide a desirable living environment for residents by preserving the owner-occupied character of the neighborhood. And as I said, this language is from 50-773 of the zoning code, which describes the purpose and objectives of rental restriction overlays, which preclude new rentals, much as a no vote here would do. I also want to avoid putting displacement pressure on nearby owner occupants, given that owner occupancy is only 40% in East Lansing, and there are policy reasons to want to avoid that occupancy rate going lower. So those are my reasons.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. I'll be voting for this because I believe that it actually meets the requirements of the ordinance. But this location is a controversial location. We passed a lot split in order to make this available for the building of a single-family home. There was worry in the neighborhood that somebody would just build a rental home here, and here we are a few years later with a rental home. I'll also note that during that process, there was a presentation from the then owner of this property as to what was going to be built there. There's a very, very unique home on that property, and this will be a unique rental within the city of East Lansing. But we've been misled a little bit on this from day one, and I'm hoping that, it sounds like the owner of this property is a straightforward individual who will do the right thing no matter what. But the history of what has happened here is not something for us to be all that proud of.
Any other comment? All right, I'm going to vote against this for the following reasons. First, under the ordinance, it indicates that one of the considerations is any relevant documentation, including any building and or zoning variances, either applied for or granted, any easements, any comments regarding application of the Historic District Code, any site plan or special use permit conditions, and any recommendations of the planning or zoning personnel. I view that within that language, this lot split was obtained under false pretenses, and that therefore it did not meet the site plan conditions required because the site plan required a single family residence, and that's not in fact what it's been. Secondly, under the ordinance, it says the prior history of the property owner and legal agent with regard to the maintenance, control, regulation, and use of other properties owned or managed by the applicant or applicant's legal agent. And with all due respect to the applicant, and thank you for your service, we appreciate it, and thank you for doing what you're doing at Michigan State University, but it doesn't appear to me, based on the research I've done, that this has actually been used as a single-family residence since purchase. I don't know what's been going on, but apparently it was advertised already. Third, the ordinance says the use of the rental unit does not cause traffic congestion or movement or on-street parking demands out of proportion to those normally prevailing in the zone in which the rental unit is located. I disagree with the staff, and I guess with the commission, and it reached the conclusion that the use of the rental unit licensed for up to 2 unrelated persons or a family would not cause traffic congestion or parking demands out of proportion to those normally prevailing in the zone. I disagree based on my experience in that neighborhood, in this location. This is a small little pocket house, actually a pretty cool house, actually a house that should be occupied by a family, actually a small house. But the configuration of the driveway, the property lines with the contiguous properties, and you may, sir, be a victim of the fact that we don't actually have yet an ordinance that regulates Airbnbs, but it's hard for me to believe that the use of this as an Airbnb is subject to any reasonable regulation in terms of parking, et cetera, et cetera. And so I just think it's going to create traffic congestion or parking demands out of proportion to those normally prevailing in this zone. A fourth reason is that the rental unit should conform to the building height, area, and yard requirements of the zoning district in which it is located. It is my view historically that, in fact, because of what I said before, this lot split was obtained fraudulently, that in fact this rental unit does not conform to the building height, area, and yard requirements of the zoning district in which it is located. And then finally, the fifth reason for me to vote against it is the parking, or the ordinance says the rental unit must provide facilities for the on-site parking of motor vehicles in compliance with the requirements of this chapter and Chapter 50 of the City Code, and it will not cause motor vehicles to be stored or used on-site in excess of those normally prevailing for similar uses in the neighborhood, because of what I said before about the inadequacy or unavailability of parking enforcement in terms of multiple cars. An example would be somebody rents this for a Michigan State game and invites 6 of their friends from Saline or wherever, and they all want to park there or on the street in the neighborhood. And I just think that's a relatively possible outcome of this kind of a rental. And then finally, those are my reasons. So I'm going to vote against this tonight. Okay, any further discussion? Let's do a roll call vote on this one, please.
Councilmember Altman?
No.
Councilmember Meadows?
Yes.
Councilmember Watson?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Singh?
No.
Mayor Brookover?
No. Okay, the motion for approval fails. Okay, we move on to item 5.4, consideration of approval of the revised site plan and closure of 2 lanes on Albert Avenue between MAC Avenue and Grove Street, beginning no sooner than April 29th, 2024, and ending no later than 5 p.m. on August 12th, 2024 for Albert Alfresco. And we have the tag team with us tonight.
We have the tag team here tonight. Good evening. So yes, here tonight we want to review the revised site plan and operations for Albert Alfresco for summer 2024. Just to give a little feedback, these recommendations from staff are based on numerous conversations with community members, with other departments within the city, and the businesses located throughout the downtown. So start there. So the first thing with the site plan that we're proposing is that we're actually going to move the closure to the east, right outside Hopcat. There's a pedestrian crosswalk right there, and it'll just be on the east side of that. What that does is it allows the 7-Eleven parking lot access point off Albert to remain open, and it also allows for the pickup drop-off for the Newman Loft residents on Albert Avenue to maintain its current location. In past years, when the closure took place, that pushed the drop-off pickup location further to the west. There are some challenges for some of the residents, mobility challenges, and it made them walk further to their car service. So that was the first change that we're proposing. The second is, the third is, in the past, there's been no public restrooms, and we've heard from some of our downtown businesses that is caused some issues, again, unintentionally. But people coming down to Albert Alfresco who may not be going to a restaurant to eat dinner and just come down for game night, whatever that may be, don't have access to restroom, and so they were going to other businesses and asking to use the restroom. So we are proposing to put a porta potty down there. We're going to start with one, maybe at a second, just a block over. It would be serviced a couple times a week. We actually presented this today to the RHC, and it was suggested that we might want to start out with 7 days a week and then scale back. So we're going to figure out how that would work. But it will be placed so that the porta potty company can pull up, service it, and then leave. It'll also we'll make sure that it's secured so it doesn't tip over. The next item that we wanted to address was that when the East Lansing police officers are present at Albert Al Fresco, this is overtime for the police department. And so they were absorbing those costs. And so the Downtown Development Authority and the DMB recently took action and approved as part of their fiscal year 24 budget, so the current year budget, and set aside funds for fiscal year 25. So the overtime costs will be covered between the DDA and the DMB. And then finally, a couple other things that came up is that in the past we've heard from other businesses stating, Albert Al Fresco is very centrally located right there, and the 100-200 block of Albert. They would like the opportunity for this to become available for additional seating, places for people to come outside, sit at a picnic table, eat their dinner in other blocks. So we have talked to the Marriott, the general manager of the Marriott, and they've approved to allow us to place some seating on both the east side and the west side plaza, so Fountain Square, and then on the back side of the Marriott, if you want to call it, near Charles, on that elevated plaza, which is very underutilized. We're going to place some planters up there and some seating. We're not going to place picnic tables in either of those locations, because what we don't want is it to become an area where it becomes a burden to the hotels, so people leaving trash or things like that. But they'll be easy, for people to come down, visit Albert Al Fresco, grab a coffee somewhere, and go and sit. We also talked to the businesses in the 300 block to see if they would be interested in taking a couple of the parking spaces along that area and adding some seating there. They were not. There was 3 businesses we spoke to. One was in favor, 2 were not. So we said we'll leave that alone. The 400 block, as you know, we call it the colorful parking ramp. During COVID, we did have some additional seating down there, and so we're going to place some seating back in there again because we'll have extra inventory from this reduced site plan. And then in the 500 block, the Bailey parking lot, we are going to use a couple of parking spaces down there, actually 4 parking spaces. We've received permission from the Metzger-Fabian family to set up, we call it the rooms, where we'll have the 4 planters, we'll have some picnic tables there, some other lounge chairs and that. We had talked to the businesses in the 500 block, and they were very supportive of that. And then if you recall, we also do have some additional seating in that pedestrian alley in the 500 block between right next to Campbell's Market. So we're here tonight to answer any questions. One thing I'll point out also is from an operations standpoint, we received feedback from some of the downtown property owners, the residential. As you know, we have a lot of residential properties in our downtown. We've seen tremendous growth the past few years. And with Albert Al Fresco being closed during, that portion of Albert being closed during move-in and move-out, it causes challenges, backups, and also, you layer in all the vendors and that service the downtown businesses. It was making it very congested in the area. And so we came up with a solution of actually, in the past, what we've asked council to do is give an end date of September. We actually talked to our police department and others and came up with the date of August 12th. So Albert Al Fresco would go through, Sunday evening, Monday morning on August 12th, Department of Public Works would come down, start taking down all of the items from Albert Al Fresco, and we would have the road open by 5 p.m. that day. Now, in saying all of that, the footprint has been shrunk. It has not changed at the east end, just again at that west end. But within that space, we're still able to have seating, dining. We're still able to have game night and have music. We've carved out a centerpiece in all of that. And so those activities will still take place. And this also gives us an opportunity, we thought, maybe to try some some other evenings, some of the music and events in some of the other locations that we're expanding into. So we're here to answer any questions.
Okay, questions for the staff from council? Yes, sir.
So I have a bunch of questions, I guess. I like the idea of expanding it to other locations so that there's sort of little fresco pods all through the downtown. One question I had is, why is the east boundary there as opposed to further toward MAC?
Because we maintain the Grove Alley, so that alley that comes out, Linden, we call it the Grove Alley, it's from Linden and it comes out to Albert. We keep that access point open.
And why does that have to be open?
That was just at the time that was thought that was the proper way and there to cut it off. So when vehicles coming down, because that alley services a lot of deliveries also for some of the businesses in that block. And so the idea is the deliveries could come down and then they continue heading east out onto Albert.
And there's no way to make that possible?
There's also the private alley
Yes.
on the south side in between Pinball Pete's and Jolly Pumpkin, so we would be blocking that private alley if we moved it any further to the east.
Okay, all right, thank you. Heather, in your memo from March 15th, you had two small footprint proposals, of which this is the second one, and the first
Correct.
one included the Albert Grove intersection. And my understanding is you decided against that because of the concern with, the possible concern with cut-through traffic through the 7-Eleven parking lot.
Yes. So there was concern raised by both police, DPW, and the owner. When we originally went out and were talking to the businesses, we were showing both proposals. And the owner of 7-Eleven, he was willing to try it. He thought at first, but he had concerns with just safety of people cutting through his parking lot and, customers coming in and out. And then when we shared this with the other departments within the city, the same feedback was there was concern of how the pedestrians and the vehicles would interact in that space because people would see that as a cut through. The other item was even keeping that intersection closed. It's still really to make that area so the traffic can flow through safely and the pedestrians can move through safely. We needed to remove that and pull it back to the east so that intersection could be remained open.
So my overall concern here is that people like this. People like the old al fresco and its big footprint. And I think that there is a value to having a big footprint. It just gives people more space to spread out. And we've gotten a lot of emails about this, right, the past 2 days. Mm-hmm. They don't want to change it. And this was something I heard about last fall, too. People brought this up without any prompting from me. They wanted to see this. They thought it was a great idea. They wanted to see it continue. And my concern is that we're being a bit too conservative here. We're worried about what might happen if there's cut-through traffic, but we haven't actually determined that there is going to be cut-through traffic. We had somebody write in to suggest that we could post a sign saying no cut-through traffic and then maybe enforce it because there will be police down there as part of the overtime you mentioned. And what I haven't heard yet is anybody saying this is impossible for the following reasons. And even with the original large footprint, 7-Eleven found a way to cope for 2 summers. Right? They made it work apparently, because they're still in business. And I think that any downtown business benefits from being in the downtown because they sort of get to have a business and make money. And everybody contributes to a community sometimes by giving back. And if the 7-Eleven found a way to cope with deliveries, then at some level, I'm not sure that's unreasonable to ask of them. And so I'm just a little concerned that there's sort of a bit of a tail wagging the dog going on with this proposal. And I guess I would have appreciated the opportunity to decide between either this footprint or the version A footprint that you had in your March 15th memo, and we could have sort of had a fuller discussion about that. But But I guess one follow-up question to that is if police are here and willing to comment on how they see this actually playing out in terms of the cut-through, that I would certainly welcome their comments.
Evening, Council Deputy Chief Pride, East Lansing Police. So that was one of the concerns that I brought to the site plan as well, was the cut-through traffic that is going to happen from entering either on Grove or on Albert, and with all the foot traffic that we see in the downtown, especially later in the evening, and during the times when our residents are down there majority of the time at dinner time and stuff like that. So that's my concern, is the safety of our community, walking through that area, and people in vehicles either cutting through or packing out of the parking lot, where you then will start seeing more crashes within that specific parking lot of 7-Eleven. So also another concern that I brought to the site plan was in reference to the vehicular traffic. When you start talking about emergency vehicles being able to make it down into that area to be able to provide services for the community, whether it's police or fire, when you have an intersection that's shut down like that, or you make that footprint larger, it's harder for those emergency services to get down into that downtown area.
But don't you already have that red lane at the top for emergency vehicles?
We do. That brings us just down into that area, but when you start talking, and I guess I could leave it to the fire chief, but when you start talking about a fire truck coming down to that area and then being able to get out of that area, if that intersection is shut down, now they're backing up for a significant amount of distance, trying to get out of there.
And these are all concerns that you put on the table in the past with the larger footprint?
I was not a part of any of that conversation at that time.
I'll pause for now and let other people talk. Go ahead.
I just want to add one thing. So about a year ago, I stepped into the role as interim CED administrator, and at that time, I started having conversations with some of the businesses as we were preparing for Albert al Fresco. And a couple of the businesses shared with me concerns that they had raised in the past and asked that I look into this on their behalf. And so that's what I did. So I went back and looked at my notes, and my first meeting with some of the business was in March of 2023. So this isn't something that staff has just decided we're going to make this change. This has been months of us looking at, saying to the businesses, let me get my footing, let me get through this year, let me see what we can do to address these items. And so all along, even through last year, through Albert al Fresco, in the back of our mind, there was this, we have to come up with a solution somehow to make this better, because it's great for the community, but it's unintentionally impacting some of the businesses in a negative manner. And so can we find that balance? And so after months and months, meetings, talking to other departments, this is what we've come up with.
And I appreciate all the work that you've put in, and I know the history of that. But we've sort of been inundated by the public comments saying we really like this and we want it to stay the way it is. And so there's competing interests, absolutely, and we're here to try to find a balance.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions for staff?
I have some. Can you refresh my memory on the survey results, community survey results over on the Albert al Fresco?
So these survey results are from 2023. Yes, I had to get my years right. So I believe there was about 638, if we could go back, 683 responses in 2023, representing double the responses from 2022. How would you rate your satisfaction? 4.4. How likely are you to return to Albert al Fresco? 4.7 out of 5. How comfortable? 4.5. All positive. The community really, and I understand the community really enjoys Albert al Fresco.
Mm-hmm.
We understand that.
And has there been ever like any survey questions about the size or scope of Albert Al Fresco?
Some of them we allow like open-ended, and so some say have it all year round, you know. Others, you know, say extend it into the fall. So yes, we have heard that.
Has there ever been an anonymous survey of the business owners downtown with regard to their views on Albert Al Fresco?
Yes. 2022?
What's anonymous?
Oh, it wasn't anonymous. I'm sorry. 2022.
Thank you.
I'm curious, I know we've, in passing, Heather, been talking about barricades.
Yes.
And I know that there are some new ones in the works. So where are we at with that in terms of?
Right. So this all came out of the discussions last year because one of the, what had come up in the past before is, well, can you change the footprint? Can you just move on certain days? And it's just not that easy with the type of barricades we have now. They're large concrete blocks. You see them down there. We paint them, but they're not very modular or mobile. And so as part of our ARPA funds, yes, we are currently working with Thornton Tomasetti. They came in and met with about 15 staff. We spent a day with them. They reviewed ahead of time all of our current site plans for our street closures, and they also then took a tour of our downtown and other areas, and they will be coming back in about 2 weeks and presenting draft site plans. And the idea is that we're trying to get more streamlined with our street closure program. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes with a number of departments when it comes to street closures. And so we want to be able to come up with a system that there is an approved site plan that will be approved by City Council at some point that will show the type of barricade systems that need to be in place for a certain type of street closure. It could be for a neighborhood block party. It could be for an event downtown, you know, art festival, all of that will happen. But in this initial stage, what they're gonna do is come back with these draft site plans. We'll review them, make final comments. They'll come and present to council. Council will review, make it, you know, hopefully make, you know, a recommendation to approve those. Once those are approved, then staff will then go back out and we will actually send out bids to purchase the actual products. And so there's a number of different barricade systems out there. There are gate systems, so you're allowed to close a street for a half day, those types of things. Our goal is to have all of that completed and the purchase done. It would be great this fall. We would love to test it out for like the Great Pumpkin Walk. But going into next spring, we would have a site plan at that time, you know, whether it was Art Festival or Art Al Fresco or some other event, we would come and say, these are the dates we want, and then this is the site plan you approved, and this is how it will be set up.
Okay,
yes.
so the new barricades are not going to be in hand until fall
Correct.
at the earliest?
Yes.
And I guess my, like, just tying this together since it's after 9, and as many know, I turn into a pumpkin. It's my normal bedtime, but one is if we're going to have more modular or mobile, barricades for Albert Al Fresco, that there's other potentially avenues to alleviate some of the business concerns. Like, I mean, what I heard is the mayor alluded to when I attended actually an RHC meeting on his behalf, that it was really their deliveries. So I just want to, I think there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, if you will, if we have the right systems to do so. I think the community has spoken. They want to see this expanded and not necessarily scaled back. That is my concern with the plan on the table, that we're moving in the wrong direction, even though there's a number of challenges that we face around this. Totally recognize all the legwork that it's taken to get to this place. So I just want to highlight even some of the public safety concerns outside of traffic, but I just want to make sure that we are looking at a variety of techniques, to alleviate some of the challenges we've seen from this. And I mean, my biggest question when you were going over some of the scaled back and where some of the furniture is going to be is my son's going to ask about the games, because whether it's the jumping length or a lot of the other pieces, like, it is a demand of us to go downtown. And so again, when we talk about drawing families and other folks downtown, it's core. The last thing I'll say back to scale on the timeline is I know at the University Student Commission, they also express like all the cool stuff happens in the summer when we're not here. And totally understand like the move-in times as a challenge. But again, I challenge all of us collectively. How are we designing the community that services a multi-generational community, including the college town? And the last piece, I will say, is on the university needs to be a part of this, and whether that's assisting with public safety, whether that is, being thought partners with us to ensure and we can support an Albert al fresco that is more inclusive of both sides of Grand River. So with that, I will conclude my comments there.
Any other questions for staff? Dr. Altman? Let's go with Ms. Watson first, please.
Thank you. Can you remind me the time frame last year?
I believe it was May 6th.
Yes, first week of May through the last week of August.
Last week of August, okay. And then if it was expanded, what does that mean for the Newman Law part that you mentioned? So you're saying they're getting picked up on Albert?
Yep.
And then they wouldn't be able to?
So it's just pushed back further to the west because the road's closed at that point.
Okay.
So the closure, how it has been in the past few years, the closure actually just begins just outside where you pull into the Albert parking garage.
Okay. And if police are getting overtime, does that include PACE?
What we were provided a number from was from ELPD. I do not know if that includes PACE officers or not.
That did not.
But the police can ticket the people that park wherever to pick up food?
Correct.
Thank you. And then what's the percent shrinkage in this diagram, would you say?
Layman's guess, this is 35% of what al fresco was last year.
Okay. And then my last question is the outhouses. The outhouses, or the porta potties, they're not going to close, right? And is there going to be sanitary or water?
Yep. So we'll have them serviced. It will be a sanitary, so hand sanitizer.
Okay.
They won't have water.
Okay. And you're sure that's not going to be able to get tipped over?
We're going to try everything to not make them get
Good.
tipped over.
Again, layman's guess, but probably 35% of what it was last year.
So it's reduced 65%.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Dr. Altman?
Thank you.
I had a motion. So I would like the opportunity actually to vote on the slightly larger Plan A from your March 15th memo, the one that shuts down the intersection of Grove and Albert. But that's not before us, so I don't want to make a motion to vote on something that's not in our agenda packet. So on that basis,
I
I'm
see
gonna-
no reason why you couldn't make a motion if you wanted to. I don't see why that couldn't happen. It's part and parcel of this consideration, so.
So then I'm happy to do that. So I'm going to move approval of a site plan that expands this to include the intersection of Albert and Grove Street with specific reference to Heather's March 15th memo. So this would be version A, so that if we need something concrete. And then the motion would also include approval of the site plans for Fountain Square, Elevated Plaza, and Bailey parking lot.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, moved by Altman, seconded by Singh.
I'd
To
like
expand.
have a couple questions then.
Can I just restate the motion, or state the motion for the record, please? To expand the site for this event to include the entire intersection of Grove and Albert, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then to incorporate the additional sites that are part of this motion, not located on Albert per se.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead, Mark, thanks.
So I do have a question then. When I look at this, I'm not exactly sure how wide the street is there, but yeah, it looks to me like we're reducing the size of this by about 28 feet because we're using the crosswalk as the barrier, correct? The crosswalk would be open, which is, I think, an 8-foot sidewalk there. Is on the east side of the area, is that the location that we had as the end of it last year? Okay, so I'm a little confused by how we come up with this being only 35% of the size it was on the prior year, just looking at the map there. It looks to me like it's at about 65% of the size that it would be last year, or something like that. And apparently, we don't have any actual measurements on this?
So last year, the closure went past in front of Harper's, all the way down to right by the parking.
Okay, gotcha.
garage.
I
Yes.
get how you get there
So we're just giving
then.
a snapshot of what it would look like for this year. So yeah, so I think Foster's Coffee was part of that also.
Okay,
So past
got it.
there, and that's where the barricade started. And there was a turnaround there.
All right, so that answers my question. I understand how you get to that figure then. The issue I have with this is that, this is going to change over time no matter what. People were used to the larger size. I don't know how much the very western end of Albert al Fresco was being used, because I think this identifies largely where people did congregate, or where I saw them congregating anyway, over the last year. So there were areas down there that were sparsely, let me say that, populated with individuals. The whole idea of this, started in 2017 when we approved the Bailey lot, the parking lot number 1 closure and the construction project down there, which extended for a lengthy period of time. And one of the approvals that we gave was to eliminate the curb lines so that we would encourage more pedestrian traffic down there, more useful for our festivals and other things. How this morphed over a period of time into Albert al Fresco was a great thing. But the original idea was that this would be closed on weekends and available to the public, and then reopened, at other times. I see this as something that is still being developed as an idea within the downtown area, and certainly it is. I'm glad that it's there, because we needed to actually attract people back into the downtown after the downtown was closed for all the construction that we had going on at that particular time. But I'm concerned about the idea of something that we have built there and that we have encouraged, the senior housing project, being impacted by this move back in there. And I'm wondering whether there isn't sort of another way to look at this as well that could accommodate at least the needs of the individuals there who are physically challenged and need to have that drop-off site more close to them. I realize that we're just going back to the sidewalk on the other side of the street. But I'm still concerned about that and how it will impact it. And I would prefer to see something that shows me that. If you do have a copy of the original, I guess it was Plan A, or B, whatever it might have been, you know, I wouldn't mind seeing it flashed up there so that we have a better feel for what the impact of this motion might be.
That like over to me and I'll have to download it, stop sharing screen, so just a minute.
While we're working on that, I'm going to ask another question just to see if we can the 7-Eleven business owner, I know that there was signage that was incorporated during the closure in the past. Is there, outside of, I know we heard from our police department on some of the cut-through traffic, but I'm just curious back to the business owner, if there's any additional pieces that we could be supportive on signage, that he still remains open and that there is a path around.
So we had, when we went out and met with the businesses, and we met with the owner of 7-Eleven, and we talked about originally having that intersection closed, but the rest.
Mhm.
We told him at that time that we could work to have additional signage saying no cut through and all of that. You know, he was, I'm not going to speak on his behalf, but his preference is, of course, the plan that we're showing.
Gotcha.
So.
Okay.
And Mr. Chubb, maybe could you give the current council a little dissertation on the interchange legally without violating the attorney-client confidentiality in terms of the 7-Eleven going back to 2021? I think we started in on that with.
Sure. So some of that predated me, so I'm not actually familiar with the initial communications, but I know that there was some concern for potential litigation in that regard. Is that what you're aiming at? Okay.
Well, then I have another question, which is that if there is some modification to this which might allow access to Grove Street, is there a way for us we could extend down on one side in particular and then allow what would be the north side of Albert to remain open? Was that considered at all when you were developing any of this? Because if there's a public safety issue and we have a threat of litigation, I'd like to avoid both those things, obviously.
So I would have to take that information back and share it with the other departments that we're receiving feedback on before I could and bring that back. I wouldn't be able to answer that tonight.
Because I think that would facilitate too, even the pickup for the seniors who are living down there. They might have to go a little bit further, like half of a street, to be picked up, but they still would be able to be picked up and dropped off right in front of the building. So just something to throw out. Like I say, I prefer to avoid litigation where possible, even though I kind of enjoy it as a lawyer. And but also, I think more importantly, if there's a public safety issue here, we should take care of that.
Mayor, may I
Please, go ahead.
So the threat of litigation, as my understanding, was associated with closing off the Albert access to the 7-Eleven parking lot, right? This does not do that.
Correct. But what this does is it's still, so the deliveries would come down, go through the 7-Eleven parking lot and come out. So they would park in the parking lot there. This concern, though, this area is that people heading east on Albert would cut through the parking lot to get over to Grove. You would have the same people coming down Grove cut through the parking lot, and then head west onto Albert.
And
So
I-
that was the concern.
Right, and I understand that concern, it makes perfect sense, but we haven't actually seen it happen yet. That's what's in my head. I mean, if we have alternatives that we need to circulate through the departments, then my original motion was going to be to defer this until next week so that we have some more time to think about this. And I'm not going to make that motion, but if somebody else wanted to, I would certainly support that.
When's the setup on this?
April 29th.
My birthday. It's a perfect day for it. All right. I think there's enough questions here that, I'll make a motion to defer this until our next business meeting, which would be next week. Is that it?
Yes, I think it's noticed as a business meeting.
Oh.
And we need a second.
I'll second that.
Okay, no, I don't think there's any discussion on the motion to table, is that correct?
It's a
not
motion to defer.
table, though. I'm sorry, to defer. No discussion on that, is it?
Correct.
Okay.
Excuse me, point of order, there is a discussion on motion to defer. There is not a discussion on motion to table.
Okay, any discussion on the motion to defer? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to defer until our next meeting of next Tuesday, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. The motion passes unanimously. I think we are at the end of our business agenda. Could we have a motion to move to closed session?
I move to request a closed session pursuant to MCL 15.268 sub 1 sub H to discuss an attorney-client privilege memorandum that is exempt from disclosure pursuant to MCL 15.243 sub 1 sub G.
Is there a second?
Support.
Support from Meadows. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Altman?
Yes.
Councilmember Meadows?
Yes.
Councilmember Watson?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Singh?
Yes.
Mayor Brookover?
Yes, so for the benefit of the public, we'll be going into closed session. We will come back after closed session. I suspect that there will be no further business, and we will adjourn at that time. All set? Okay, we're back in session. Do we have a motion?
I'll move that we return to regular session from closed session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Yes.
Councilmember Meadows.
Yes.
Councilmember Watson.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Singh.
Yes.
Mayor Brookover.
Yes. Do we have another motion?
To adjourn.
I'll move to that we adjourn.
Meadows moves, Altman seconds. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes. Thanks, folks. Appreciate your time tonight.